This is extremely daunting because it's been quite a while that I faced crowd like this. Of late, I only have to face Shahrizad in court and she will It's not very difficult. I've been asked to concentrate my part of presentation mostly on the numbers. Partly because I think a lot of the debate lately has boiled down to whether or not the programs proposed by Pakatan Rakyat is feasible financially. Also partly because we know that Najib is going to rebut everything from numerical perspective on the basis that whatever is being proposed is going to bankrupt the country. In fact, Najib actually made a comment almost about 5 days after we launched our manifesto. We got news from the other side that they actually planned to launch their manifesto earlier as well. But we beat them by 2 days, and therefore they had to postpone until today. And when Najib says that he's going to go through and rebut one by one, I was quite delighted because I think inadvertently he didn't realize. When he said that he was going to go through and study our manifesto, he's already preparing to become leader of opposition, because that's what leader of opposition. Prime Minister presents manifesto and get it done, not go through opposition's manifesto and try to... Okay. I don't have much time, I only have about 15 minutes. Let me start with what is the biggest difference between our economic approach between Pakatans and Barisan Nasional. Because it is not so much about the detailed and specific programs. It is about what it is that we can change if we are given a chance to administer Putrajaya for 5 years. If you go through all the economic pronouncements made by Pakatan Rakyat, it is very clear that we are looking at changing the structure of the economy. I remember Einstein saying that you can't be doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same return. Only crazy people do that. And I think BN has been doing that for the last 50 years. It's all about pumping more money and expecting everything to catch up, which is not going to happen because there are specific structural issues in our economies that we have to address. That's why the key thrust of Pakatan Rakyat's manifesto is number one, to tackle the issue of competitiveness. We live in a very globalized world, and even Myanmar is opening up. When I was at Petronas, one of the companies that I looked after was the Myanmari subsidiary in Myanmar. I tell you that of all my staff all over the world, and I have staff from almost 20 nationalities, I think people from Myanmar are the most hard-working and diligent. If they open up and you allow them to compete and we remain as we are, in 20 years' time we'll be left behind by the Myanmars. That's why we have to address the issue of competitiveness. There's also the issue of wages and cost of living mismatch. Wages did not increase so much for the last 30 years, but houses now is what, triple, quadruple than what it was 30, 40 years back. And of course, ultimately it comes to the basic questions of how do we unlock potentials in this country. Not just the potentials of the nation, but more importantly, the potentials of every single one of Malaysians, regardless of race and background. That is the most important question that we have to. That's why the ultimate objective then, if we were to do everything that we propose to do in this manifesto, we should be able to shift the economic imperative of this country from one that is centered on race, this obsession about getting 30% equity for Bumiputra, which I think we are nearly there because Syed Mokhtar is already getting 29%. we have to change that and make sure that we start planning our economy and putting policies that raise the income of every single household, regardless of where you come from. Because if everyone benefits from better wages, better opportunity, better job, better education, ultimately the country as a whole and you won't stop talking about Malays, Chinese, Indians, Iban and Canada. But I have to tackle the part on the numbers, because I think jolly good, you know, all this philosophical approach, I think people are convinced. What is more important is whether or not we are able to implement this, or whether or not we will bankrupt the country. We've looked at the numbers quite in details, and you've seen from Tony's presentation. I think one key aspect that you have to look from the numbers is now, if you look at the overspending, the spending above budget of the last 3 years, in 2010, 2011 and 2012, Barisan Nasional has collectively over that 3 years spent a total sum of 48 billion of over budget expenditure. And you will see later on, we think that every year we need an additional 45 billion ringgit in order to implement all this. So even if you don't talk about the kind of savings that we can effect, even if we can't do, or if we cannot find ceti tanah like Tan Sri Khalid in Putrajaya back then to collect all this debt, I think even if you rein in the over budget spending, getting about 40 billion ringgit to fund for programs is actually not difficult, because that's exactly what Barisan Nasional is spending now. However, I think if we put these three key measures, we should be able to get the kind of financing that we require. We have to make sure that we build in the discipline for spending efficiency. We have to pay the right cost for the right goods and services. If you want to pay for cows, you pay for cows, not condos. That's important. You know? Spending priority, putting the right money in the right sector is also important. And I think more importantly, jokes aside, our economic potential has been stunted. We should be growing at a much higher number. And if we hit that number, obviously the economy will grow better, we will get better revenue, and the government will collect more tax. So the whole approach to financing public spending should not be too dominated about it's going to bankrupt the country. It's about what structure of the economy that we can change so that it can lock the potential of the economy, because once you do that, when the economy grows at the right pace, and I think we will get a lot more money to pay for a lot more program for the people. I'm going to go into the detail of the numbers now. We have to compete with the might of media controlled by Barisan Nasional, TV3, Utusan and so on, which every day repeats the same number over and over again to build a perception that our program is going to bankrupt the country. I'm going to show you that even the approach to their calculation is wrong. What we need to do if you were to decide, I mean, this is accountant's talk. I mean, an accountant, when you decide whether a project is feasible or not, we should look at the marginal increase in annual spending. Then it's only fair for us to decide whether we can afford or not. What BN is doing now is quoting one big sum for a particular program that we propose without annual cash flow, and that kind of big number really does not reflect a true test of affordability. I give you one example, which is plus takeover. Tony has presented on LDP. This is the one that is quite popular, being repeated by UMNO every night, even by Najib, that if we were to take over plus highways, it's going to cost us 50 billion and therefore it's going to bankrupt us. All of you are analysts, all of you knows that that 50 billion ringgit number is quoted from one unsolicited offer from Asas Sebeneka, something, I think a company previously owned by Halim Sa'an. And there's not really much basis to that valuation. But it's that offer of 50 billion ringgit that is being used as a bogeyman to at least paint a very negative picture. If we were to take over plus highways, it's going to bankrupt the country. Obviously, that's not really the case, because we have to look at what is the annual cost minus what is the annual savings, And that marginal annual allocation that we require, that's basically how much we have to set aside if we were to take over PLAS. Now, PLAS is now wholly owned by Khazanah and EPF. If you were to guarantee the same return that Khazanah and EPF gets from PLAS now, you are looking at the numbers at the top line, about 2.9 billion, 3 billion and so on. This is basically to compensate for their holding, and we have to compensate as we go along with the right return as what they are getting now. Over a period of time, we will fully take over and we will fully compensate Khazanah and EPF. And then we have to pay for the operational and other costs. And this is basically projection and projected from their own financial statements. You are looking at maybe for 2013 about 850 million. And then I'm sure all of you are aware as well, last year PLAS actually issued a big bond for 30 billion maturing in 27 years. I don't know why they need 30 billion now, but they did take the 30 billion sukuk, and therefore we have to inherit that 30 billion. Obviously, the first thing that we will do when we go into government is to find what happens to that 30 billion that they have raised from sukuk. But fair enough, in our calculation, we have to set aside. So we have to set aside coupon, at least if you are looking at 5% coupon yield, that's about 1.5 billion every year. And then loss of tax revenue, 530 million, because PLAS is now a national entity and won't be paying tax. And then you set aside every year the payment for sukuk bullet repayment due in 27 years. I mean, it's a very simple calculation, back of the envelope type of thing. Even by doing this, what we need, the total cost that we will have to pay is only about 6.9 billion ringgit every year. Because you don't actually pay everything at one go. You will phase this out and you will refinance everything, and it's only about 6.9 million. On the other side of the coin, of course, when you take over PLAS, you don't have to pay certain things that we are paying now. For example, we don't have to pay compensation. Every year, the federal government pays about 6 billion ringgit in total compensation to toll concessionaires. The one that is due to PLAS, based on 2012 number, is about 800 million. So we don't have to pay 800 million. We will get, most probably, an additional tax from the multiplier effect of people and businesses not having to pay toll. Currently, the public is paying 2 billion toll every year, and another 1 billion from compensation. So there's about 3 billion ringgit that if you phase out tolls, this 3 billion ringgit will go into domestic economy, and from the multiplier effect, definitely you will get higher growth and hopefully better tax revenue. And of course, at a very conservative 5% saving on operational costs, all in all, if you take the net effect of the total annual cost minus the total annual saving and new revenue, you're only looking at 5.5 billion ringgit to take over PLAS. That's why we have maintained all along, if BN actually use the right calculation and the right numbers, then we can take over PLAS. The problem is, in this country, there are two sets of mathematics. One is UMNO's mathematics, the other one is the rest of the world mathematics. So that's nice to you. I'll just go very quickly. There's another example, and I have to show this at least to convince our learned friends in this hall today that we have gone through at least the basic feasibility and financial simulation before we open our mouth. And we are convinced that it's doable. I mean, take free education. A lot of people say that we offer free education because we want to win votes. That's not the discussion that takes place at Pakatan Rakyat. If you look at BN's tertiary education policy, it is slowly and progressively being privatized. And more students now have to go to private institutions with quite hefty fees that they have to pay. The reason being is because there is just not enough investment in new universities, public universities. The fact that a lot of people don't have enough confidence on the quality of public universities is a different thing altogether. We are talking about a model of higher education. If Malaysia continues on its current path, where people actually have to go and rely on private education for for tertiary education, that means that over 10 years period, more and more people will have to pay and take more loans. Currently, an average cost for a degree is about 50 to 60,000 ringgit for the whole course. Over 10 years, most probably this will go up to about 80,000 ringgit per degree. If you have 3 or 4 children, and this goes to all, Malay, Chinese, Indian, from all backgrounds, if you have 4 university-going children, in 10 years' time, you either take a loan of about 300,000 ringgit, or your children just don't go to university at all. That is actually not a good option, and more of our people are falling into the bottom 40%, which basically earns about 1,900 ringgit a month. They can't afford higher education in this kind of privatized higher education system. That's why we say that you have to make the changes now. It has to be free education so that you democratize the access to education. What is most important? The biggest and most effective way of social mobilization is through education. Making sure poor children for the long houses in Sabah and Sarawak go to school, get the right education, because from amongst them, there could be one Nobel Prize winner. We never know. From amongst the poor Malays, the poor Indians in estate, from among the poor Chinese, you don't know the kind of brain we have among them. We will only know if we fairly allow every one of them the same opportunity to get the right education. Then in 20 and 30 years' time, we will reap the benefit. That's why, in spite of a lot of criticism, Pakatan Rakyat holds steadfast that we will implement free education, especially when it can be afforded. And I'll show you how. For us to do away with the tuition fees that currently our students have to pay in public universities, we require 800 million. Now, 1 month from now, or 1 week from now, you will hear Najib telling you that for us to do away with university fees, we will require 10 billion, and that's why he's going to bankrupt the country. He doesn't know how to count. Currently, the annual allocation for university is already 7.5 billion. You can check that in the annual budget. It's already 7.5 billion. And that 7.5 billion is already paying for 90% of the total university cost of the 21 public universities. I got 2-3 more minutes. Okay. And if you were to pay the additional 10%, simple maths will show you that it's about 800 million. And likewise, if you go through the motion of the rest of the calculation, 5,000 living allowance for 500,000 of students, both in both in public and private universities who qualify for it, that's only about 2.5 billion. If you go through the whole motion, we are confident that with 6 billion ringgit, we can start rolling out free education, and it can only get better once we get more money from savings after that. Alright. I don't have to go through the car duties because I'm running out of time, but you can have access to this we'll distribute this after this. But the total cost, if you were to go through every single one of our election pledge, the total cost is about 45.75 billion ringgit. This is the total that we have to allocate in our budget. How are we going to do it? Number one, of course, is from savings. Tan Sri Khalid has proven it. Lim Guan Eng has proven it. We've done it in Kelantan and Kedah. Obviously, we can do a lot better when we are in Kedah. Now, I've listed here the total expenditure controlled by federal government everywhere. When I say control, that also includes expenditure of agencies, statutory bodies, GLCs that are fully controlled by government. At the most conservative estimate, it will be about 206 billion, and these are all procurement and project expenditure, not including salary and emoluments, not including pensions, nothing. These are 260 billion ringgit every year are spent on projects and procurements. In Selangor, in between January to September 2012, Tan Sri Khalid has piloted a special project whereby he compared the expenditure for a particular roadwork on the same roadwork before and after we took over, during the end-time compared to when we do it. And all in all, when we tally it, there is a 24% savings. Dr. Sri Anwar is here. So I better wrap up very quickly, already get note, okay? So, you know, and that number is very conservative. Because we are not even talking about all the other cloning projects. It's just jalan raya, you know, it's just tarring roads. If we can apply the same 24% savings target on 206 billion ringgit procurement and projects expenditure controlled by federal government every year, you will easily get about 49.5. I mean, that number means it's doable. You know, whether we can get instantaneously within a year, of course, perhaps it is a challenge. But that is a workable and achievable savings target because it's been done in Selangor. And then of course we have to look at the spending priority. I mean, we have to reform the energy subsidy to IPP and TNB. We have to make sure that the subsidy actually goes finally to the end user and not stuck at 2 or 3 big conglomerates in the form of capacity charge and so on. You have to do that. We have to renegotiate monopolistic concessions. We have to relook at all the compensations paid for by the federal government. And most importantly, we have to reallocate Prime Minister's budget. So Dato' Sri Anwar, you cannot go on holidays as many as Najib has been doing. And I said before, our economic growth is stunted. I think we are hitting only about 5.2% annually. If you do a straw poll, I think a lot of people think that we can achieve 7.5% consistently if certain structural changes are made to our economy. If our economy grows to 6.5 to 7%, with an additional GDP of about 20 to 30 billion a year growing, I think you can be looking at another 4 billion in extra revenue from that enlarged cake, the size of the economy of the country. So I think with all these three things, I hope what I've set out to do, I've proven to you that number one, there is a thought process behind every single program that we offer. It is not a populist program, it is a necessary and even a necessity that we implement this what seemingly a populist program, but it is important because the three key thrusts of our economic policies is to solve the mismatch between wages and cost of living. We want to unlock potential and we want to improve our competitiveness. If we do this with the right of funding and especially with the kind of leadership that will not tolerate a single 0% tolerance on corruption, I think within 5 years, my friend, Malaysia can become the most energetic and progressive nation in Southeast Asia. Thank you very much.